Okay, we're live. Welcome to the Education Economic Development Subcommittee. We have a robust agenda today. We're starting with the Interagency Committee on School Construction. Laura Hyde is our analyst. So Laura, if you are ready, you are on.
All right, thank you very much. Let me share my screen. All right, can you see that? Let's see, one more time. There we go. Okay, so we're starting on page 1 with the operating budget summary. With fiscal 23 IAC budget increases by 12.4 million or 206.8% to 18.4 million. This is primarily due to a change in the funding source for school safety grant programs from a capital appropriation funded with pay-as-you-go funds in fiscal 22 to a general fund operating appropriation in fiscal 23. If you'll tune to page 4, overview of agency spending, you can see the school safety grant program, $13.5 million or 74% of IAC's budget. Personnel is 4.3 million or 24%. Contractual services is 427,000 or 2%, and all other administrative expenses receive less than 1% of this allowance. If you'll turn to page 5, the proposed budget, you can see that personnel expenses are mostly changed by an offset between turnover adjustments and reclassifications, and other changes include the school safety grant program, as well as a one-time deficiency allocation in fiscal 22 for 350 school facilities assessments. You can see under the school safety grant program allowance, due to the change in the fund source, DLS recommends to the budget committees that IAC and the Maryland Center for School Safety, which co-administrate these grants, submit a joint update on this program. You can see under personnel data on the same page, page 6, IAC has approximately 34 of 41 positions filled with a current vacancy rate of 16.6% compared to 22% at last year. IAC recently hired 8 new employees, 5 that started in December 21 and 3 that started in December 22. You can see on page 8, Exhibit 4, milestones for statewide facilities assessment. Chapter 14 required IAC to contract with a third-party to complete the SFA by July 1, 2019, coordinate with LEAs to identify data elements for the assessment, and develop standards and procedures to comprehensively update the state's data on the condition of school facilities so that those data were not more than 4 years old. To provide a standardized comparison of building conditions across the state, IAC used a Facility Condition Index, or FCI, to quantify the school facility attributes and estimate the cost to improve or maintain the physical condition of a building. FCI data were then to be used in a new tool called the Maryland Condition Index, or MDCI, which uses FCI, but also accounts for a building's space deficiencies using the Maryland Educational Facility Sufficiency Standards. In September 2020, BPW approved a contract with Bureau Veritas, or BV, for the SFA. In November 2020, BV completed the SFA pilot, and by July 2021 had completed the assessment of all 1383 school buildings across the state. In September 21, BV and IV and IAC submitted a draft of the final SFA report, as well as initial assessment data to be used by the work group on the assessment and funding of school facilities for potential funding decisions. A final report summarizing the results of the assessment is due in 2022. In calendar 2021, as part of Chapter 698 of 2021, the deadline for the final report for the work group on assessment and funding of school facilities was extended to December 31, 2021, and the work group was charged with making the following recommendations involved in school construction funding: revisions to state and local cost share formulas to accommodate changes enacted in Chapter 36 and 55, methods to determine gross area baseline and the maximum state construction allocation for each public school construction project approved for state funding, the purpose and implementation of the revolving loan fund, and appropriate incentives for school construction to reduce the cost per student and the total cost of ownership of public school facilities. The work group met 8 times between July and December of 2021 to review SFA data and determine possible recommendations. And at its final meeting on December 15th, 2021, the work group made its final recommendations, which are detailed in Exhibit 5. You look at Exhibit 6 on page 11, Due to concerns about assessment data raised by the work group, LEAs, and DLS, the work group was unable to complete the weighting of the MDCI components and other related funding decisions. Instead, the work group decided to offer an additional set of recommendations related to the assessment data, its future use, and a timetable for future funding decisions. Recommended actions prior to the end of calendar 2022, which you can see in this exhibit, include extending the Healthy School Facilities Fund by 2 years from fiscal 24 to 26, delayed use of the assessment data in all funding decisions until May 1, 2026, and updating regulations involving the use of SFA data. If you look on the next page, you can see under IMFAL, Chapter 14 required IAC to build a cloud-based asset library that would integrate preventive maintenance and facilities data and allow LEAs to access these data electronically. The project has been delayed, but in April 21, IAC issued an amended RFP and solicited new bids for this project. IAC expects an award in April 22 with project completion in September of 2023. However, due to delays in in-bulk procurement and implementation, continued review of SFA data, and final workgroup requests, DLS recommends to the budget committees the addition of restrictive language pending a report from IAC documenting progress on these tasks. You turn to the recommended action section, which starts on page 13. You can see this request as I just mentioned. You turn to page 14, you can see language for the non-public school security improvement program, which is part of the school safety grant program as presented in the budget bill of fiscal 23, a report on public and non-public school safety grants related to that request, and then the recommendation to delete the general fund deficiency appropriation for the school facility assessments contractor. This concludes my presentation and I stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hyde, for the great presentation and analysis. Are there any questions for our analyst? Hearing none, before I turn it over to the agency, I just want to make note and welcome the Chair of the Appropriations Committee, Maggie McIntosh, who has joined us. We are welcome and pleased to be joined by the former Chair of the Budget and Taxation Committee and a great public servant for many years of our state, and we're really happy to see him continue his public service. Mr. Chairman, it's great to see you. Welcome. I think you're on mute, sir. Mr. Chairman, you're on mute there. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me know that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate your thoughts. Very nice of you. And I want to say hi to Chair McIntosh too. Congratulate her on a great career. And the other familiar faces I see on the screen. Nice to see Chancellor Perman and Secretary. I just want to make a few very brief comments before Bob and staff take over. I've been the chair since late summer. It's been a significant learning curve process for me. I've obviously often had hearings with the IAC and didn't really know how it functioned too well, as I think probably many legislators, but I'm beginning to get a grasp on what we do. The board I'm working with are really outstanding gentlemen, ladies, who several have experience in the construction industry, and they're very dedicated to making sure we do what we're supposed to do. Executive Gorel and his deputy, Cassandra Viscara, just do an excellent job. Are very, very knowledgeable people, and I'm very impressed with them when they want to reach out and help anybody who wants to communicate. Frankly, the staff, two of whom you're going to hear from today, just do outstanding work and really dedicated, and the board's constantly impressed with the level of detail that they exhibit in their reports to us. So I just want to say that one of my main goals, frankly, is to maintain and improve our relationship with the legislature and the local LEAs, and have us be a resource where people view us as somebody that can help rather than hinder progress, because that's what I think we should be, a very useful resource. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll let Mr. Gorel begin his comments. Thanks a lot. Good to see you.
Yes, sir. Nice to see you. Thank you. Mr. Corral?
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair Casemeyer. And thank you to Laura for your presentation and all of your help and all of DLS's help. I know that we grind through a lot of material, and I appreciate all your support. I'm really proud to work at the IAC. I'm the executive director. And with me are several members of our staff to provide information and answer questions. They are Alex Donahue, who's Deputy Director for Field Operations, Cassandra Viscara, who is Deputy Director for Administration, and Arabia Davis, who's our Funding Program Manager. Before we respond to the analysis, we want to tell you a little bit about the big things that have been going on at the IAC and in school construction. Arabia will begin with a little bit of information from FY22 of the school funding and initiatives that we've had underway. Arabia?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. In FY 2022, the IC approved 91 projects, including 36 major construction projects, 2 kindergarten projects, and 53 systemic projects with a state share of almost $370 million through the Capital Improvement Program, including funding added on through Enrollment Growth and Relocatable Classroom Program. The IC also allocated an additional $105 million that included $40 million in federal ARPA funding through the Healthy Schools Facility Fund to projects that improve the health of Maryland school facilities. This program funded more than $18 million to correct unreliable or insufficient air conditioning, around $31 million to correct unreliable or insufficient heating, $5 million specifically for temperature regulation, almost $40 million for roof projects, a little more than $1.1 million to address lead remediation. Additional projects for indoor air quality and window replacements were also funded. A survey of LEAs recently conducted by the IC reported that 98% of public schools in Maryland have air conditioning systems, and this is up from only 78% in 2004. Currently, 21 of the 24 school systems report air conditioning in all of their classrooms. Only Baltimore County, Baltimore City, and Garrett County have schools remaining. There are currently 27 schools that have classrooms without air conditioning. These LEAs report that within 3 years, the number will be reduced to only 10. 4 are in Baltimore City and are used only as swing space and are planned for disposal. One is in Garrett and may not need air conditioning due to the climate in a geographical area. 5 are in Baltimore County, but the vast majority of classrooms in those schools are air conditioned, and the county reports that after 3 years, only 9 classrooms in 5 schools will remain without air conditioning. Now I will turn it over to Alex to talk about the Built to Learn program. Alex.
Thank you, Arabia. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. The Built to Learn Act took effect almost a year ago, and the IAC and the Maryland Stadium Authority have been working diligently since that time to implement its requirements. On July 23, 2021, the IAC and MSA approved a program memorandum of understanding as required by the law. Following that MOU, the IAC has been reviewing and approving projects which occur on a rolling basis rather than annually like the IAC's other programs. Including approvals made as recently as last Thursday, the IAC has approved over $700 million in projects for funding through the Built to Learn Act. I also would like to provide a quick update on the statewide facilities assessment. Based on recommendations from the Knott Commission, the 21st Century School Facilities Act of 2018 required the IAC to contract for an assessment of the condition and educational sufficiency of every school facility in Maryland, and then keep the assessment current such that the data for any particular school is never more than 4 years old. The initial assessment began in November 2020 and concluded in July 2021. We will start the first annual refresh assessments this year. We believe we have resolved initial concerns with data accuracy, and we provided an updated data set to DLS on December 21st. We're also developing some guidance for LEAs on how to report critical facilities information for inclusion in the assessment data. Now, Cassandra will respond to the DLS recommendations in our budget analysis.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. You have received our written testimony, so I'm not going to read through all of the great information that we put in that testimony document. The IAC is happy to provide the reports requested by DLS and concurs with the first 3 of the 4 recommendations in our budget analysis. The one exception is the recommendation that the deficiency appropriation for the FY22 facilities assessments be deleted. As Alex mentioned, the IAC is required to keep assessment data current. In order to meet this 4-year requirement that's in statute, IAC needs to assess approximately 25% of the school facilities each year. Again, I don't want to reiterate what you already have in your budget testimony, but I just want to emphasize that without this deficiency appropriation, the IAC won't just fail to complete the assessments in FY 2022, but will also lose out on an opportunity to train new assessors on staff that we are working to hire right now so that we don't need a contract in the future to have an outside vendor do these assessments for us. It, of course, would also make it impossible for us to meet the requirement that we assess the schools again within the next 4 years. So we respectfully request that the committee reconsider this recommendation and approve the FY22 deficiency appropriation.
Okay, well, thank you to Chair Casemeyer, Mr. Gurel, and your team, the thorough response to the analysis.
Thank you,
Are there
Mr. Chair.
questions for the agency? I see Chair McIntosh. Madam Chair.
Self off mute. I'm learning how to do that. Actually, this may take just a couple of minutes. My apologies to the subcommittee, but as many of you know, I chaired a work group on the assessment and funding of that was done by the IAC with an outside consultant. And actually, there's a bill that's being introduced that's going to have many of the, or all of the recommendations that work group has made. But one of the disappointments, and it's truly a disappointment of mine, I am someone who has wanted to see as an outgrowth of the NOT Commission, some form of assessment that assesses all the schools in Maryland, that gives them a ranking. So we really do hopefully compare apples to apples, oranges to oranges, but most importantly, we really do identify schools that really need our attention fairly rapidly because of deterioration in HVAC systems, or no air conditioning is one of the issues that is constantly raised. And it's a very good point to raise. So I support this, and I chaired that committee, wanted to chair that committee because I wanted to see that assessment done and the ranking developed so that it would guide at least the healthy schools, or a portion of our current IAC or school construction funding. And hopefully someday it would inform at some point all of our school construction funding, because we will in fact weed out those schools that need the most attention and have them renovated. As you know, Bob, and I'm directing this question to you, we ran into a serious issues, and we had to defer. The work group had to make a recommendation to defer the use of any such ranking using this data till I think it was FY 27, 26, 27. Is that correct?
That is correct, Madam Chair. Michelle?
And again, huge disappointment felt here by this delegate. But I just think it's important for the subcommittee to hear what the concerns were. Didn't Bob, LEAs raise concerns about how the assessments were conducted in their schools? And some LEAs, I think, felt that the assessors took differing amounts of time in their schools. For instance, I think that was a particular issue in one of the western counties. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, there was an allegation. We did follow up on that. I found no evidence of assessment material that was not up to snuff. We had about a 0.5% of errors in our material and as we put it together. And as you know, and members, this was quite an effort. We had some delays in getting going on the procurement. We were up against the deadline and we got it done. I think that the LEAs, who are all very busy with everything that's coming at them, we're having a hard time keeping up with the material as we provided it back to them in the verification process. So I think that they were concerned. So these delays, certainly, as we go and do a refresh annually, first one we need to get going on, is going to give them plenty of opportunity to be able to get comfortable with this standard measure of apples to apples, as you say, Madam Chair, and know why the data is in there and as it is, and be able to challenge it if they're not comfortable with it. So I think it's more of the process than it was any big errors in the data. At least we didn't find them.
I mean, DLS found errors in the data, and we had to have you rerun the data sets. I'm gonna guess 3 or 4 times. And as a matter of fact, someone made reference to the data sets that were sent down in December. And I have already been told that there are some issues that DLS is going to be raising about that data set. So are you saying that you don't remember DLS having issues with the data sets that you sent down?
Oh, no, Madam Chair. In fact, at the meeting, I said that I am disappointed that we didn't have everything cleaned up to the committee at the time that you were able to start that committee. And I hope to be able to gain back your confidence is what I testified in the committee. The data errors that DLS talked about, we did meet with them. We went through them. We did find about a 0.5%, which caused us to have to go back to the data and reshuffle it. A lot of the difficulty that we had is in the sheer size of it. And providing this is a database of over 500,000 data points. It's very comprehensive. It's not something that was just done lightly. It had to be done so that it was comparable. And to be able to take data out of a large database like that and put it into Excel spreadsheets so that it worked for DLS to be able to do the analysis was a difficult task. It wasn't one that I anticipated and did not leave the amount of time that I should have left to make sure that was prepared and in the format that it needed to be in.
Let me share with the subcommittee that one of the pieces that the work group has now tasked and asked the IC to do with this outside vendor is when they go into a school and they look at an HVAC system, and on the HVAC system, it'll have, little, stickers in there that tells you the age and so on and so forth. And they can calculate based on the model, the age, everything, how much life that HVAC system has left in it. But these appraisals, these assessments were done during the pandemic when a lot of the schools were closed, and what they failed to do was to turn on the HVAC system to see if it even worked. So we did have databases that came down that indicated that we didn't have any schools that needed air conditioning, or that, there was a lot of misrepresentation of what's actually there. That they would see the lights in a classroom, but they didn't flick them on, the switch on to see if they actually worked. So there was just, I think, a qualitative piece to this that the LEAs felt was missing. And finally, my favorite example is that this very same group of consultants came in and did an assessment for Baltimore City Schools of their facilities 3 years earlier. And 3 years ago, they told Baltimore City Schools that City College, one of our great high schools had a boiler and so on and so forth that absolutely needed to be replaced. There was no way around keeping that boiler. That they had, put too many pieces of tape on that boiler to try to bubble gum it together, and they needed to replace it. It had as a matter of fact, it's the original boiler, and that school's, am I right, Delegate Smith? Is that school approaching almost 100 years old? I mean,
Yes, it's pretty old.
it's incredible. I mean, it's unbelievable. So they had, it's long outlived its life expectancy. But during this assessment, when they went back in 3 years later, they said, that it didn't need replacement. Now, how can one the juxtaposition of those two assessments within 3 years, when all of a sudden the boiler has generated new life? By the way, not that I'm trying to stretch out your EED meeting. I'm sorry to everybody else who's waiting. I just went up today and did a little taping for Baltimore City delegation, and the young lady there who's an intern with the photographer said she graduated from City College. And I said, "You did?" And I told her what a great school it was. She said, "Yeah, except when it got closed down because of boiler problems." And she said it happened 3 times her senior year. So that's today, I'm told this. So I just want to say to you, DLS established that there were issues with the data. The LEAs came in and testified to these issues. And I think it's important for our subcommittee to hear it, but I'm hopeful. I'm one who's rooting for the IAC to get this right. And I'm rooting for the IAC to make sure the vendor gets this right, Bob, and I want you to know that.
Yes, Chair McIntosh, you have always been very supportive, and we don't take that lightly. This is a hard job to try to get this information, and I don't want to repeat, but we didn't get the information back from LEAs to let us know what it was that they had as far as difficulties. We are going to redesign our refresh so that there's no questions about what it is that we need to know about. The boiler system, this is a different type of an assessment than others that have been seen. First thing I did was look at this is years back. I looked at all the assessments that were done of all the schools in the state, and you couldn't compare if you had 2 different vendors over 4 years, you couldn't compare vendor A to B. And that's the way it's always been. And those assessments oftentimes were desired to have this needs to be replaced, honestly, as an outcome. The assessment we just completed was one that didn't just look at the tag of when that equipment should be run out and therefore you need to replace it. Your warranty's out on your roof, so you need to replace it. This assessment had professionals look at every piece of equipment and say, there's 3 years left on that piece of equipment or building system. There's 4 years. So it wasn't intended to line up with past assessments at all. But nevertheless, I'm sure that there are some errors, and the more we get the LEAs engaged, because you can't do anything of this scale without some errors, the more engagement we have, the more refined this is going to be. And the wisdom in how that the legislature developed this 4-year ongoing database will mean that it will get better and better and better and better each year we refresh it and have the engagement from the LEAs.
Well, you and I've had this discussion before. If there is any system in a school that fails to the degree that a school is shut down, closed, and students lose educational learning time, then I think those issues, wherever they are, whatever county, whatever school it is, have to float to the top for us as policymakers to look at. One final thing, since the work group, I do want to note, and I think you're going to be getting, by the way, Chairman Casemeyer, I think you'll be getting a letter or a request for some folks who have done an in-depth analysis of the data that was put out.
Yeah, we talked this morning.
Good. And I do think we need to look at this issue, which is, by the way, does the square foot cost of a roof in Baltimore City differ from the square cost of a roof in Garrett County or Montgomery County or anywhere else? I do think we need to look at that as kind of an
Sure.
overall issue. And with that, I want to thank you, and Chairman Casemeyer, it's always good to see you.
You too.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, Mr. Grell, I think you've heard from our chair, and these issues with these assessments are serious, and I know our chair is taking them seriously, but the subcommittee takes them seriously, and we are going to take the recommendations from the DLS seriously as well, which I think will be the start of the conversation, not the end. And so, we welcome continue that dialogue. Thank you, Madam Chair, for bringing all that to light for our subcommittee today. Any other questions from the subcommittee? All right. Well, thank you again, Mr. Chairman. As always, good to see you, Mr.
You too.
Durrell.
Thank you very
for your
much.
team. And I
Bye-bye.
know we'll be in touch soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right. Next on our agenda, we have the University System Office, and Sarah Baker is our analyst. Ms. Baker, welcome.
Thank you. Let me just pull up my screen for y'all. And I'm going to start with Exhibit 1 in transfer students. And overall, in fall 21, transfer students comprised 52.4% of the new undergraduate students at USM institutions. And this is down from about 56.4% the previous fall. As you can see, that other transfers, and these include those from out of state, comprise 62% of the total transfer student population, while those from community colleges account for about 32%. Exhibit 2 breaks down the enrollment trends by community college and other transfers. USM enrollment enrolled its highest number of transfer students of almost 38,500 in 2019. Since then, enrollment has declined 10.6%, or about 4,000 students, and most of this occurred in 21 when the enrollment fell by 3,800. This is mainly due to a decrease of out-of-state transfer, which may reflect students preferring to stay closer to home. Of concern is the continuing decline in community college transfers, which in 21 declined for a third year. Since 2018, community college transfers have declined by almost 12%, and this may reflect the continuing enrollment decline at the community colleges. Exhibit 3 just shows where the majority of the community college transfer students are going. And these 4 institutions account for about 81% of where the transfers are going. We asked the chancellor to comment on efforts to increase the number of transfers from community colleges, including efforts to improve pathways to USM institutions. Exhibit 4 shows the enrollment at USM's regional higher education centers. In 21, enrollment at the RHEX increased over 12%, and this was driven by an enrollment increase of about 13% at Shady Grove. And this is due to UMB's medical cannabis program. But despite this growth at Shady Grove, this is still almost 12% below that of 2015. Turning to the proposed budget in Exhibit 5, after adjusting the 22 and 23 budgets, the state funding increases almost 14%. Or $2.8 million when you exclude PAYGO funding. General funds increased $3.7 million, which is slightly offset by a little over $800,000 decline in HEF. You'll see that the total funds decreased by $145.4 million, and this reflects a decrease of $148.2 million PAYGO funds. So when you exclude these funds, total funds at System Office increased $2.8 million. Increases in state funding include $1.5 million to restore the 21 DPW cut. $1 million is related to general salary increases, and there's over $200,000 for the opening of the new facility in Southern Maryland. And I just wanted to note that the RHEX at Hagerstown and Southern Maryland are included in System Office general fund budget, and in general, they comprise about a quarter of their general fund budget. Now, some of you may recall a recommendation stemming from a 2019 JCR regarding the financial viability of Shady Grove was the creation of a separate budget code for the 23 budget cycle. And this is shown in Exhibit 6. The adjusted 23 state funds increased 10.6% or 2.4 million. Just wanted to note that the statewide salary enhancements in 22 are budgeted within the system office since the budget was created during the 22 budget cycle. So the increase in 23 is overstated. Shady Grove also gets state funding, includes 1.8 million to restore the BPW reduction. And turning to recommendations is to see the system-wide overview for overall recommendations. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Baker, for the great analysis as always. Are there questions for our analyst? Okay, let's turn to our agency. I think Dr. Perman is with us, our chancellor and his
I had a
team.
quick question, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Delegate Smith, I apologize.
I'm so sorry. I just want to make sure, Sarah, I didn't miss something in terms of the enrollment increases. One of them you attributed to, I believe, a medicinal cannabis program. And I just couldn't keep note of that, which location you're talking about.
It's Shady Grove.
Okay.
So most of that growth is due to UMB's medicinal cannabis program that they teach there.
Okay, any other questions for the analyst? Okay, apologize, delegate. We will now turn to Chancellor Perman. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Barnes, members of the subcommittee. Wonderful to be back and testifying on the system office's FY23 operating budget. And I'm joined today by USM Vice Chancellors Joe Boffman, Ellen Herbst, and Patrick Hogan. I'll start by thanking you for your continued support of the university system and the office that manages its operations. I also want to thank Ms. Baker for her always thorough review. I want to give you one example up front of our management in the form of our financial stewardship. At a bond auction just last week, we sold 102.9 million of Series A bonds with more than $12 million of premium, money that will go towards supporting academic and auxiliary projects statewide, system-wide. We also refinanced about 24 million in previously issued bonds. And this refinancing saves us more than $550,000 over the next 4 years. And that lowers the debt service payments for our institutions. Our auction performance, even better than we expected, was made possible by our incredibly strong bond ratings, AA1, AA+. And these bond ratings bring tangible financial benefits to the system, to our students, and to our fellow Maryland taxpayers. And I believe they're a testament to our outstanding financial management. And they say something about ratings agencies believing in the quality of the system, the ability of the system to grow, to sustain its work. That's the work that we do. That's an example of the work that we do at the system office, which, as I think you're aware, is one of the leanest in the country. Less than 0.5% of the entire USM budget goes to administrative costs at the system office. And the data show that this makes our office the third most efficient out of those at 29 comparable university systems across the country. That's by design. That's in keeping with the legislation that governs the USM, which was drawn up at our founding in 1988. And it's intended to ensure that state money granted to the system passes through to the universities themselves. I do want to say a little more on this point in a few minutes, but I'd first like to respond to the issue raised by Ms. Baker. I've been asked to comment on efforts to increase the number of students transferring from community colleges into the USM, including efforts to improve pathways from two-year colleges to our institutions. I know you're well aware that the number of transfer students that we enroll depends on several factors. The first, of course, is the number of students who enroll at a community college in the first place. Maryland's community college enrollment has dropped in recent years, and that's at least partially attributable to COVID. Students experienced academic loss, financial hardship, challenges to their emotional and mental health. And all of this has taken a toll on their college-going plans. It's in the best interests of the USM and of Maryland higher education writ large to work on rebuilding that robust two-year college enrollment. The second factor influencing our transfer numbers is the ease with which credits earned at a community college can be transferred to one of our USM institutions. As you know, responsibility for maintaining and improving the statewide transfer platform has fallen to the USM office. We've recently made enormous progress on the ARTS's platform, which has undergone an update and expansion for 35 participating USM and non-USM institutions. The platform is improved in two important ways. First, as courses are deemed comparable, ARTSys automatically updates the system. It's no longer a time-consuming manual process for university staff. And more importantly, the student experience is much better. The platform allows students to explore many transfer pathways at once, to save their data and their searches, to upload their transcripts, and schedule virtual or face-to-face meetings with advisors. The new ARTSys will be online at all 35 participating institutions by April, and staff training will be complete by May. Certainly, ongoing support for ARTSys and programmatic support for students are necessary to keep improving our transfer capabilities. The third factor affecting transfer enrollment is course equivalency, the degree to which community college courses are aligned with those of the USM, and consequently the number of courses that system institutions accept for transfer. In consultation with MHEC, we joined Morgan State, St. Mary's College, MICUA, and the Maryland Association of Community Colleges to revise COMAR in a way that meets the requirements of the Transfer with Success Act, specifically the requirements governing the reporting of credit denial. The revisions we've made will mean more community college courses will be accepted for transfer at the USM and other four-year institutions. The fourth factor affecting transfers is the health and expansiveness of articulation agreements that allow community college students to transfer seamlessly into a degree program at one of our institutions. We have more than 850 of these articulation agreements. ARTSys will make it clear to students exactly what these curricular pathways look like and the most efficient ways to move from their community college program to a four-year degree of their choice at the USM. And the fifth factor affecting transfers is the existence of full articulation pathways that are buttressed by wraparound support for students. These pathways provide more than guidance on which courses to take without credit waste or duplication. They serve students with academic and career advising, with peer support, with internships and mentoring. This model is being pioneered by the universities at Shady Grove. And the support services USG offers are made available to students before they ever get there, before they transfer to USG. It's a model we hope to adopt and replicate across the system. I do want to, in wrapping up, revisit my earlier point about how lean the USM office is, because it has something to do with this transfer matter. In the context of your question and concerns about improving our community college transfer numbers, I want to make these points because obviously it's an incredibly important issue, and I appreciate your raising it. You don't fix a problem like declining transfer numbers by starting at the community college level. You start fixing it long before that. You fix it in grade school and in middle school, not at 18, 19, 20 years old or beyond. And if we collectively want to take a systemic approach to fixing this access problem, which is where transfer issues fall in, this preparation problem, then we need some money at the USM office. I understand this isn't the way our shop, the USM office, has operated in the past. I understand why our dollars are almost exclusively pass-through dollars. If you don't want a big bureaucracy, our funding structure is understandable. But it also stops us from fixing some vitally important things, like enrollment at institutions that have suffered significant declines. It stops us from creating new things, like system-wide programs that strengthen the pipeline from elementary school to middle school to high school to community college and to the USM. It takes money to build that pipeline. We can incentivize it rather than asking our institution presidents to somehow stand up these programs one at a time, one institution at a time on their own. Now, I'm not in any way suggesting a diversion of money from our universities to the USM office. All of that would make things worse. I'm suggesting the nesting of some discretionary dollars at the system office to allow us to make meaningful change and, of course, to bring accountability for that change. I recognize I'm putting on the table here as I close, a somewhat new way of doing business. But my own opinion is that it's a smarter way. And it reflects getting to the core of a problem rather than sort of coming in the middle. I would respectfully like you to consider that as we go forward. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I've rambled on for a bit, and I'm happy to answer questions, of course, with my colleagues.
Always happy to hear from you, Chancellor Perman. Thanks for being with us and your thorough response. Are there questions for Dr. Perman? Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chancellor, good to see you as always. Glad that your team is here, and belated happy birthday to the member of your team, Patrick Hogan, who I know had to spend a good chunk of his birthday with our committee yesterday and answer a lot of our questions. So wanted to wish him a happy birthday. I had a couple of questions, and I appreciate your comments on the Transfer with Success Act, and just mention it again, how much I think Senator Elfreth and I are both just incredibly excited the work that's being done on that. We viewed it as a small fix to begin with, and you all have really taken it and run with it. I guess I just wanted to ask you, unsurprisingly, about Shady Grove. So, excited that their strategic plan was officially unveiled last week. I have not had the opportunity to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, though I'm looking forward to it. But just sort of curious, the timeline of, your thought and your team's thoughts of when we'll start to see some of those things implemented and really see sort of Shady Grove 2.0.
Well, as you know, so much of action starts with recruitment of great leadership. And I'd like to publicly, since you've kindly acknowledged the new strategic plan, recognize the work of Dr. Ann Kademian, who has come to lead us at Shady Grove, and who's shown herself to be a masterful leader. I don't have the timeline in front of me, but I think that some of the changes that are reflected in the plan are underway. Things will move, I think, Delegate Solomon, very quickly. And there is a great commitment from myself and the Chancellor's office. I think you've heard me say this before. I've been fortunate enough to be around the system for a long time. And Shady Grove has been too much a topic for too long in terms of the challenges that have occurred there. This is not meant to be critical. It's meant to say that I'm personally tired of it. So I'm very invested in moving that strategic plan along. And I appreciate your recognizing it.
Thank you, Mr. Chancellor. And I guess it's not even a question, sort of more of a comment, because I don't think we need to relitigate it, especially publicly. But, obviously our team spent a lot of time talking about the, SB 9 last year, the collective bargaining fix. And I think we just all want to make sure, I think this whole committee wants to make sure that that bill is being implemented with fidelity. I know it requires a big shift of mindset, not only for the bargaining units, but obviously for the university system. I think we're hearing some concerns that maybe it's not being implemented the way it was intended. So would, again, prefer to maybe take this offline, but have a conversation to just make sure that the way we all worked it out last year, that we're hoping it's being implemented. But appreciate you being here, and thank you again for your work on the transfer in Shady Grove.
Thank you, Delegate.
All right, thank you, Delegate. Any other questions for the agency? Delegate Novotny? No? All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chancellor, and we will see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. All right, finally today we have MHAC Student Financial Assistance. Ian Klein is our analyst. Welcome, Ian. You are on.
Just give me one moment. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so the first item that we are going to be discussing involves Fafsa filing. Exhibit 2 on page 8 compares Maryland's Fafsa completion rate to our competitor states. As is shown at just under 34%, Maryland compares favorably to 6 states, while the number of Maryland students who have completed a Fafsa is 4% lower than the 2019-2020 academic year, which is what we would consider the pre-pandemic year. As can be seen in the exhibit, all competitor states, with the exception of Virginia, have experienced a decline in FAFSA submission relative to the same time during the 2019-2020 cycle. Secretary should comment on what steps are being taken to promote and encourage FAFSA filing and how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted FAFSA filing in Maryland. Secretary should also comment on the findings from the Federal Student Aid Conference concerning the transition to the Student Aid Index and how these findings would impact financial aid in Maryland and MD caps. Exhibit 3 on page 9 shows the total number of FAFSAs filed in the state. Starting in the 2017-2018 cycle, the numbers exceeded 150,000, which can be attributed to moving up the filing date 3 months to October and using prior tax information to determine eligibility. However, there's been a steady decline beginning with the 2017-2018 cycle. Should be noted that the 2022-2023 numbers are as of January, and students have until March 1st to file a FAFSA to apply for state aid. Turning to guaranteed access grants, which cover 100% of financial need for the lowest income students in the state. On page 11, Exhibit 4 shows the number of GA awards. In 2021, GA awards increased to its highest total ever of 3,090. Overall, since 2015, the number of initial awards has grown 166% from 525 in 2015 to 1,397 in 2021. Exhibit 5 on page 12 shows that 95% of those receiving a GA grant in fiscal 2021 had an expected family contribution lower than $3,850. The other awards were older awards that were moving through the system. Moving on to educational assistance grants, which cover 40% of the need at four-year institutions and 60% of the need at the community college level. On page 13, Exhibit 6 summarizes the information on these grants. Again, the effects of the early FAFSA filing can be seen with the number of on-time applications increasing in 2018 and 2019. The number of EA awards increased 2% from fiscal 2019 to 2020, growing from 52.2 million to 53.4 million. These numbers have decreased for fiscal 21 and 2022 as awards provided for guaranteed access grants have increased. You'll note the number on the wait list has also declined over 62% beginning in 2020, which reflected a change in the EFC cutoff to the wait list to reflect the Pell Index. And for 2021, that number was $6,345. Exhibit 7 on page 15 shows that 92% of the EA awards go to students with an EFC of below $3,850. The Secretary should comment on how MHEC determines the appropriate allocation of GA and EA awards, focusing on how MHEC ensures that the neediest students are provided the greatest award, while striving to maximize the number of awards provided to the eligible applicant pool. Turning to the budget on page 16, Exhibit 8 shows spending by type of aid. Of the 167.7 million provided in fiscal 2023, 74% goes to need-based aid, 12% to career-based aid, 8% to legislative scholarships, with unique populations and loan assistance repayment programs each accounting for 3%. Exhibit 9 on page 17 shows the number of award recipients and the average award amount by program. Overall, MHEC expects the total number of recipients to increase by nearly 17% in 2023, which is mainly due to an increase in EA awards, Promise scholarships, 2+2 transfer scholarships, and Teaching Fellows Award recipients. The proposed budget is shown in Exhibit 10 on page 18. The budget is adjusted to reflect a 2022 deficiency appropriation of 1.1 million for the Conroy Memorial Scholarship. EA award funding increases by 11.9 million in 2023. As a result of Chapter 59 of 2021, 2 new programs are funded this year, including the Police Officer Scholarship and Police Officer Loan Assistance Repayment Programs. Chapter 36 of 2021 mandated an increase in spending for the Teaching Fellows for Maryland Scholarship, and an additional new loan assistance repayment program for nurses and nursing assistants is included in the fiscal 2023 allowance. In total, funding increases from the 2022 adjusted budget by 32.5 million in the 2023 allowance. Exhibit 11 on page 19 shows the balance of the need-based student financial assistance fund. This account was set up to receive unused scholarship funds that could be used in future years. Currently, MHEC anticipates funding of 4.4 million being allocated out to several scholarship programs, leaving a balance of 4.2 million by the conclusion of fiscal 2022. Moving to the issues, which begin on page 20, the first issue involves the credit completion requirement for financial aid awards. College Affordability Act of 2016 required students who are recipients of EEA awards, which include the EA grant, GA grant, and campus-based educational assistance grant, to meet certain credit completion requirements, and if they did not, their scholarship could be prorated or eliminated. The intent of this legislation was to encourage students who receive an EEA award to graduate on time, which would mean 15 credits per semester or 30 credits per year. Exhibit 12 on page 21 shows the outcome of the credit completion requirement for the 2019-2020 credit roster. 34% attained at least 30 credits and were eligible to maintain a full award. 24% attained at least 24 credits, but fewer than 30, and were eligible to receive a prorated award, which is 20% less than the full award amount, while the plurality, 42%, did not attain the 24 credits needed and would lose their EEA award. Exhibit 13 on page 22 shows the credit completion outcomes for the 2017-2018 credit cycle through the 2019-2020 credit cycle. As can be seen in the exhibit, the proportion of students who failed to achieve at least 30 credits has grown over time. And conversely, the proportion of students who attained at least 30 credits has shrunk. Exhibit 14 on page 23 shows how this credit completion requirement impacted the different higher education segments for the 2019-2020 credit roster. As can be seen in the exhibit, the private four-year institutions had the greatest percentage of their student population attain at least 30 credits. However, at the community college level, 2/3 of that segment fell below the 24 credit requirement. Exhibit 15 on page 24 documents that segment breakdown over the 3 years worth of data by the percentage level that attained fewer than 24 credits. As is shown in the exhibit, the private four-year institutions have remained fairly level, with roughly 17% failing to hit the 24 credit threshold. The proportion of the public four-year student population has grown by nearly 10 percentage points, and the community college student population has for the past 2 cycles failed to achieve the 24 credit completion level at a rate of 2 out of 3 students. The secretary should comment on how students are informed that beginning in their 3rd academic year, they must complete at least 30 credits in the prior academic year to retain the full EEA award, and how they are notified if they fail to meet the program requirements, as well as what actions are being taken to specifically address the community college student population, given the large percentage of that segment that have lost their EEA awards, and how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted students' ability to take a full academic course load. The executive director of MAC should also comment on what actions are being taken at the respective community colleges to advertise the credit completion requirement and provide information as to how community college students are notified if they are in danger of or have not met the credit completion requirement. The executive director should also comment on how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted students' ability to take a full academic course load. Second issue begins on page 25 and involves the Promise Scholarship Program. Page 25 summarizes the changes that have recently gone into effect for the program, including the elimination of the service obligation and altering of certain eligibility requirements. Exhibit 16 on page 26 shows that of the 23,233 applicants, 23% qualified for the scholarship, while the remaining applicants' tuition and fees were covered by their Pell Grant and were not eligible to receive the award. Exhibit 17 on page 27 shows the distribution by college. The low number of awards at BCCC and Garrett could be partly due to these colleges offering local promise awards. Exhibit 18 on page 28 shows the distribution by EFC, and since this is a last dollar award, most of the awards were awarded to those in higher EFC categories. Secretary should comment on the reasons why the Promise program has not been able to expend the full amount allocated for the program in any award year to date, and actions that could be taken to spur interest in the program. The Secretary should also comment on the declining number of community college students in the state despite financial aid programs, such as the Promise Scholarship, that are designed to make the financial obligation required to attend a higher education institution, particularly community colleges, as financially manageable as possible for the student. The next issue involves the Next Generation Scholars Program, which begins on page 29. The Next Generation Scholars Program expanded the existing college readiness outreach program and provides state funding supporting students in high poverty school systems, enabling those who meet certain criteria to pre-qualify for a GA grant. The 2020-2021 academic year was the first year with a cohort of grade 12 students, with 966 seniors graduating from the program. Of that total, 402 NGS students were accepted to college and 175 applied for the GA scholarship, of which 97 students were awarded and accepted the grant. DLS asked the Secretary to comment on how MHEC pre-qualifies students for the GA grant when they participate in the NGS program. The last issue concerns the GA cliff. Although students who meet the requirements for the GA grant are guaranteed funding, if a family's income increases above the designated total, if even by only $1, this student may become ineligible to renew their GA award, and this is known as the GA cliff. Exhibit 19 on page 30 documents the impact that the GA cliff has had on students from fiscal 2019 through 2021. The Financial Aid Advisory Committee of MHEC has been working on potential solutions to address the GA cliff, which are summarized on page 31. The Secretary should comment on the persistence rates for those students who lost their GA award due to the GA cliff, as well as how many students were successful in receiving an EA award the following award cycle after losing their GA award due to the GA cliff. as well as the application process that a student must go through to receive the EA award. The DLS recommended actions are found on page 32. The first recommended action is for MHEC to submit a report on the impact of the credit completion requirement. And the second is a report on the Next Generation Scholars post-secondary outcomes. I will also note that on page 36, in Appendix 2, it provides the most recent audit findings for MHEC. This audit found 5 repeat findings, with 4 of those repeat findings concerning financial assistance. The recommended actions associated with these findings will be discussed in the MHEC administration analysis. And this concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Klein, for the great analysis as always. Are there questions for the analyst? All right, well, thank you. Let's move to our agency, and I know that we do have Dr. Fiedler here from MHEC. Sir, welcome, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Chairman Barnes. It's Fielder, but the easy way to remember it, it's Fielder, is a baseball fielder. My mother's maiden name was Wright, so she truly was a right fielder, so it makes it easier to remember. I just want to thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the subcommittee's continued support of higher education. It's so important to our state. We have 3 staff members with me: Assistant Secretary Jeff Newman, our Director of Student Financial Assistant Donna Thomas, and Audrey Bashum, who is Director of Finance Administration. So what I wanted to do is just spend a few minutes, a little bit about the last 2 years about OSFAs and the fact that it's had to be very agile and pivot, like all of higher education has to do, from receiving paper applications of over 100,000 per year to now switching over to electronic filing, so that switch has caused a lot of different issues to happen. So we moved from in-person meetings to over 500 visits virtually per week. That's been an extraordinary change. So some of those things have made it easier, yet at the same time more complex as we move into the electronic age. A couple other quick notes. As you saw in the analysis at our report, the GA Awards is up 15.4% to a record 3,090 students. So that's a good indication. We also are working with the Fafsa in terms of the outreach effort has gone electronic. We're no longer able to go out to meetings with the high school counselors and families, the in-person meetings that Donna's team and outreach used to do. So everything has moved to electronic, and we continue to push that. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Donna Thomas to address some of the issues and answer questions.
Hey, Ms. Thomas, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you, Ian, for a great analysis. Before providing comments to the issues raised in the analysis, I would like to share the following with the committee. During the last application cycle, the Office of Student Financial Assistance received approximately 100,000 documents from applicants applying for various state financial aid programs. Each of those documents are reviewed and processed by staff. In one of the state's largest need-based aid programs, the Guaranteed Access Grant Program, approximately 34,000 documents alone were submitted by applicants. With approximately 34,000 documents received in the Guaranteed Access Grant Program, OSFA continued to process awards before the May 1st deadline in both the Guaranteed Access Grant and Educational Assistance Grant programs. OSFA remains committed to providing access, streamlining processes, and removing barriers for students to apply for our state financial aid programs. How, may you ask? In 2021, OSFA implemented the Electronic File Upload Tool, allowing applicants to submit their documents online through the Maryland College Aid Processing System. This new tool no longer requires students to mail documents to our office for consideration of our state award. Students immediately receive a confirmation that their documentation was submitted. Also, in 2021, OSFA implemented virtual appointments. Customers can schedule an appointment online with a financial aid specialist to discuss their financial aid matters. In the first week, we serviced more than 500 individuals. To further enhance the customer service experience, OSFA is now offering virtual appointments in the evening. This will allow those individuals who are unable to contact our office during normal business hours to reach us after 4:30. Additionally, beginning with the 22-23 academic year, a secondary deadline was implemented for the Guaranteed Access Grant Program. Applicants who failed to submit their documents by April 1st now have until May 15th to still be considered for the award. These applicants will be awarded as long as funding is available after we award those who meet the priority deadline. Lastly, we implemented the Gpa Flow Tool. This tool allows high schools to report GPA information directly into MDCATs for their high school seniors. If the high school is participating in this Gpa Flow Tool, students no longer have to submit their transcript to ASA. We continue to promote this tool for high schools to utilize to ensure that students have a more streamlined process when being considered for state financial aid. By just these few highlights, you can see that ASA is committed to student access and innovation and will continue pressing forward. For the analysis, you received a copy of our formal testimony. What I would like to do at this time is to take a moment and to comment on some of the issues that were raised. The first one being the SAI implementation. At this time, we do know that MHEC will have to do enhancements in the MDCAT system. We are still having internal discussion to identify exactly what those enhancements entail and how we need to go about ensuring that those enhancements happen for both FAFSA filers as well as applicants who complete the MISFA. We also know that there will be a change into the formulas that we use to calculate state need-based financial aid. One thing that we have identified and are having internal discussion on is a potential implication to our Guaranteed Access Grant recipients. What I mean by that is that if an individual completes the FAFSA under the new SAI requirement, they will have a negative SAI of 1,500 if they select will not file. So we are having internal discussion to see if an additional process needs to be implemented to do an internal review of income to ensure students or parents are not just selecting an option to get through the process when completing the FAFSA. Moving on to question 2 and 3 that was raised in the analysis about the FAFSA filing outcomes. Nationally, there is an overall decline in the number of FAFSA completions. Federal student aid themselves has taken on an outreach campaign that began in January to promote renewal applicants to complete the FAFSA. Maryland has seen a decline of only 2% from 2021 to 2022. Nonetheless, MHEC continues to promote the FAFSA and the MISFA application. We are unable to do outreach events in person, but we do continue to conduct them virtually. We are partnering with high schools and organizations to further promote FAFSA filing, as well as continue to use social media, our MHEC website, and we encourage participation in our FAFSA Completion Initiative tool, which allows high schools and nonprofit organizations to also monitor FAFSA outcomes. Recently, MHEC partnered with the WISE Central Maryland, an initiative to help students from 6 schools in Baltimore to complete the FAFSA and the MISFA. We remain committed to making sure that students are aware of the importance in completing the FAFSA and MISFA application by our state deadline of March the 1st. Next issue that was raised in issue 4 is with regards to how MHEC determines the appropriate allocation in both the GA and EA program. In accordance with regulations, we award applicants who have the greatest need. We begin first by awarding individuals who are eligible for renewal awards in our Guaranteed Access Grant program, and then our renewal recipients in our EA program. And then we move on to initial applicants who submit documents by the deadline for our Guaranteed Access Grant program. Remaining funds are issued to individuals in the Educational Assistance Grant program, and they are ranked based on greatest demonstrated needs, starting with the 0 EFC. To maximize the number of applicants that we are able to award when we perform our initial awarding, we also factor in the prior year acceptance rate. An example of that is in our EA initial program, our acceptance rate is 30%. So we take that projection and we include it in our model to ensure that we are making as many awards as we can upfront to students by knowing that we are going to have approximately 70% of those awards come back canceled. If in the event additional funds are available after we perform additional awarding, we then go back and we make additional awards to any individual that is on the wait list. And that is in our EA program or in our Guaranteed Access Grant program, where we begin with the 22-23 year for those applicants who submit documentation after the initial date. The next issue that was raised was pertaining to the Promise program. Over the past 2 years, ASA has awarded all eligible applicants in the Promise program. We complete awarding each year in early August after the deadline of July 15th. Moving forward and beginning with the 22-23 academic year, ASFA will also factor in the acceptance rate in the Promise program when we are making awards. Therefore, again, maximizing the number of awards that we can make in the program earlier, therefore possibly preventing a wait list when we make awards in the program. One thing that's important to note that we have identified is that during the 2021 application cycle, more than 4,200 awards were made to initial applicants, and 51% of those awards were canceled. So we would like to do further research to identify the reasons as to why those awards were canceled. It was also raised as to why there has not been much success in that program. One thing that we identified that may serve as a possible factor and could be affecting initial progress could be due to the fact that some of our community colleges have their local Promise programs. And that may be some confusion between students who are applying for our program as well as the institution. And we are competing for the same students. So we may collectively need to work on our messaging to make sure that is clear. Also, perhaps the applicants in the Promise Scholarship Program who are our intended audience would be middle to high school families are not completing the FAFSA or MISPA, therefore missing the opportunity to even be considered for the award. Each year, we have a number of applicants who are considered low income applicants that complete the FAFSA and MISPA, but they do not receive the Promise Scholarship because their tuition and fees are covered by federal and state financial aid. So we need to take a different approach and reach out to our middle to high income families to make sure that they are completing the FAFSA to be considered for the Promise Scholarship. And moving forward, we do plan to collaborate with the Maryland Community Colleges, as well as have further discussion with Financial Assistance Advisory Group to identify best ways to improve the outcomes within the Promise program. The last issue that I would like to give an update on is pertaining to the Next Generation Scholars Program. MHAC will be identifying and reviewing individuals to determine that they pre-qualify for the Guaranteed Access Grant Award when they are in grades 7, 8, 9, or 10. We have created an online application for those individuals to complete, where we will verify that they meet the income requirements based on their prior tax information. Also, moving on to the recommended actions, MHAC concurs with both of those actions, and I would be more than happy to take any questions that the committee may have. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Thomas, thank you for that thorough response and all your hard work at MHAC. We certainly appreciate it. Before we get to questions for MHAC, why don't we round out the responses from the agencies? I think, Mr. Phillips, good to see you. I think there were a few responses for you as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Barnes and members of the committee. I'm asked to speak a little bit about the credit completion issue, but before I begin, I'll just say thank you all for, if you had a chance to speak with some of our students yesterday. As you know, yesterday was our Student Advocacy Day, and you know, I'll start by saying the stories that I heard from two of our student speakers, one who has become paraplegic due to a car accident, who had lost her ability to walk, but yet maintained her desire to become a graphic designer, and is pursuing her career at one of our community colleges, as well as another who experienced the loss of her son at 2 years old and dedicated the earning a degree to that death. And I say those because they're what inspire me to work and represent students that are going through so much, but they're also the face of some of the data that you see in the analysis, because our students really do struggle with some of the credit completion requirements that were attached to the need-based programs with the College Affordability Act. They attach criteria that it's very hard for some of our students to maintain because of life, because the majority of our students are by far adults working part-time. I think over half are working more than 20 hours a week, but the eligibility criteria require them to complete 15 credit hours, which is a full-time load, without any recognition of life or having to provide for their families on the side. So you'll see that played out in these numbers, specifically to and for community college students as a result. That's why we are much higher as far as the percentage of students who are not getting that 24 or more credits. We do advertise, we do make this point known in our institutions, and we have signs all over campus, 15 to finish, but there's no way to require a student to take 15. And many of our students are just trying to get by one semester at a time. They don't have the privilege or luxury of looking at this from a holistic long-term perspective of, if I go full-time, I can complete my degree and transfer in 2 years. So all of that is playing out. We know two things when students are receiving these awards, that they're either initial recipient or renewal. And we don't always know how many credits they have completed or how many they've attempted at another institution if they have transferred and are renewal. And I will note that I do believe MHEC does provide outreach into the number of credits that they have, they need to complete in order to continue to receive the award. And one recommendation might be to be able to coordinate that response with the institutions that those students are enrolled, so that we can also help to advise those students as well. The other aspect of this question was, what has the impact of the pandemic done? And again, it's a real life example of, yes, students have had to take less courses or have stopped out. And it's too early, I think, to determine the full impact of the pandemic on their eligibility, but I'm certain that there will be some sort of ramification as the numbers play out. So, you know, we're here to work with MHEC as well in all ways that we can to encourage students. But we have to acknowledge the realities for a lot of these students is that they just cannot take 15 credits per semester. And it really does hurt them actually after they finish up at our institutions and transfer, because either their award is even less or prorated, and that really hurts them at a four-year institution as well. So with those, I'll stop talking and take any questions if you have them.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Phillips. Any questions for not just Dr. Phillips, but the agency? Delegate Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Mr. Phillips. In terms of advisement for community college students, is that structured across community colleges? Do you have to have a certain advising exchange in order to unlock your ability to do something? You know what I'm trying to say? How do you know that people are really getting advised, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, we know that because of I guess it was the College Completion and College and Career Readiness Act of 2013 that we do actually put students in advisement and help them determine what career path or degree program they're going to enroll in. So we're really pushing for them to figure out what they want to study and what they want to be as early as we possibly can, and put them on the correct pathway, degree pathway for transfer and for success. But we just have to acknowledge the fact that sometimes these students cannot make the credit completion requirements.
Oh, no, thank you for that. I guess I'm just trying to figure out, like, beyond telling them what courses to take, is the advising relationship nuanced enough to kind of unpack what the challenges are? Knowing what classes you need to take doesn't mean you can take them because of the external challenge. You get what I'm saying? Like, I wanted to understand how robust the advising relationship really is.
I think that a lot of our systems are actually beginning to be intrusive when it comes to that advising and seeing how these students are progressing and counseling them. And we do have rather robust student services outreach and opportunities to interface with students as we see them progressing. And we have all types of interim measures of success to make sure they're on track. And we do reach out, and our advisors do reach out to them on an individual basis as they see the needs arise. Does that help?
No, that helps. I just was trying to figure the different, they're slightly different. And Mr. Chair, I have one last question for Ms. Thomas, if you allow.
As many questions as you need, Delegate.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So thank you, Ms. Thomas, also for being with us today. I wanted to just get a better understanding of the workforce shortage grants. I know that every 2 years or so, the Workforce Advisory Council, recommends a slate of majors that maybe should be prioritized or downplayed depending on the situation. I guess for me, I want to know, is that shortage only about the overall numbers? Like, let's say, for example, we know we need more nurses. That's just, overall. But in some instances, it's not always an overall shortage. It could be an overall shortage and underrepresentation of people of color or people of linguistic skills or things like that. I want to understand in terms of recommending the majors, how complex or holistic is the concept of shortage?
Thank you, Delegate Smith, for your question. It's an excellent question. I will share with you that MHEC right now is working to reconvene the Workforce Shortage Advisory Council that does look at all of those shortage areas. That council has been not meeting for the last few years, and we are working to reconvene it so that way we can take a look at those shortage fields. A number of those shortage fields will be evaluated to determine if they still are considered a shortage field at this time based on state standards. And once that committee has been reconvened, I can definitely provide you with more detailed information on how those determinations are made. I will make sure that we make note of that.
I really appreciate that. And now that I understand that it's been maybe kind of dormant as of late, maybe this question is moot, but I think something that you should be putting on your priority list as you reconstitute it is, how are you communicating to the school systems these priorities so that they can in turn communicate to people that are graduating from high school where maybe their attention should be prioritized in terms of their academic future?
Thank you. That's an excellent note.
That's all for me, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate Forbes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentations today, and this can be answered by anyone. Last year, we passed legislation that was to address the drop-in Fafsa applications, and I'd like you to just to speak to what you're doing to enforce that legislation or move that forward.
If it's okay with the committee, I can go first. I will share with you that the Financial Assistance Advisory Council has been consistently meeting. They are working right now on a report that will identify best practices that can be shared with high schools that will give them further guidance on how they be able to promote FAFSA completion, get students interested or so forth. The committee actually conducted a survey that was shared with the high schools to complete, and we had more than 20 high school counselors complete that survey. And some of the things that were shared during that survey is that they have had challenges with getting participation, competing with other high school activities or other activities that are happening in the area. Also just being trained and knowledgeable about the FAFSA process. And so hearing that feedback, SAC has been discussing the feedback to see what tools should be incorporated into that particular report to make sure that high schools are more equipped to have those conversations, as well as the partnerships that can be created through the institutions, as well as the high schools to make sure that that information is being communicated to students. Those discussions continue to occur on SAC. We continue to meet monthly, and that report will be submitted by April to DLS, so that way they can have a copy of it. And that's where we kind of stand based on that legislation. It's another part to that where the advisory council also will have to review reports that are submitted by high schools and kind of rank them to see if they're making progress or so forth. And as we continue with those discussions, we can provide updates at a later date.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas, and thank you today for all of your testimony. In reading your analysis, you're pulled in many different directions at financial assistance and helping a lot of people, so I appreciate your work.
Thank you. Appreciate your support.
Delegate Forbes, I'd also like to piggyback a little bit on what Ms. Thomas had to say, because at the national level, this is a continuing trend on FAFSA, decreasing amounts of completion as well as decreasing applicants overall. And some of the efforts have been, how do we simplify the FAFSA? How do we make it shorter? How do we make it easier to fill out the tax things? So they move to prior year tax filings, electronic filings, and then more outreach electronically to the students. But if the students don't file the FAFSA, they don't get into our MD CAPS program and we can't reach them. So that effort is continuing on how do we push out to high school counselors the education that they need on what to do to help their students.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it is true, they're your front line. And so if they're not educated on it and the importance, and they're being asked to do so much too, especially in this time, but the more that we can educate them, because they're the front line on this. So thank you.
Right. I don't think Delegate Solomon is back, so I think that is all. Any other questions for the agency or Dr. Phillips? All right. Well, Dr. Phillips, Ms. Thomas, thank you all so much for being here and your thorough responses. I will remind at the EED committee that we do have a voting session. We're going to take a 5-minute break and hope to get Delegate Solomon back from ECM and some of our other members back. 5 minutes on this same Zoom. We're going to be voting. So with that, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Chairman Barnes, thank you for the question, and you got your answer on Conroy.
Yes,
right
we did.
away.
Thank you so much. We absolutely did. And I'll be looking at that with committee council this week. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it raised the question for us is we have 400 recipients in the field for disabled public workers. I mean, it seemed like a high number when we first looked at it.
Yeah.
But we're following up with that at the institutions.
No, we appreciate the answer. And I think there were several questions we sent you, and I think you got us the answer to them all. So thank you for that.
Yes. Anytime. Thank you very much. Thanks for your support.
Thank you all. We'll talk soon.
We are live still, Madam Chair, just so you know.
All right, I'll be good. Gosh, I look like I have my doctoral colors on today. What do they call that? You know,
the hood thing, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. I hope it's pretty.
Yeah.
Yay, there's Kathy Forbes.
He said 5 minutes and that didn't seem like 5 minutes to me. Sorry if I've kept everyone up waiting.
No, you haven't.
Oh, I think the chair and Delegate Smith are still on. Their cameras are off, but they're here.
I'm here, I'm just eating.
Hey, what you eating?
A chicken salad from Potbelly's and a garden vegetable soup and water. I'm doing the right thing, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I got my water here. It says, it looks like coffee, but it's water. Trying to drink more water.
They put a bottle filling station right across the hall from my office door.
Oh, that's
Awesome.
great.
That's lucky.
How's Towson?
Good.
Good.
Just a reminder, we're still alive.
Thank you. Thanks for the reminder. Good thing I didn't say anything other than good.
Michelle looks out for me. She knows I have a tendency to get in trouble. Have you all been watching the Olympics? Me too.
I've been actually watching early in the morning.
Yeah.
You can see like the skating live early in the morning. It's really good. Yeah. I forget what network it's on. But or I'll text you what it is. It's it's fun to wake up and watch it and not watch.
Is this weekend the end of it? Yeah, that's what I thought. Because, for me, I now the public is going to learn a little bit too much about me. For me, it's like the Australian Open, and then here comes the Olympics. I'm just, I love it. Diane actually said, "What are you going to do now that the Olympics is going to end this week?" I said, "I don't know. Wait for Wimbledon." How you doing, Mr. Chairman?
Fine, hanging in there. How you doing?
I'm great.
Yeah. A little tired today. I should not have come to my law office today. This will be the last time I come to my law office midweek. I would just go to Annapolis.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be in 4 days next week,
Right.
So we are still live.
Yes.
On the
Zoom. Michelle's trying to protect all of us. She's
Michelle.
afraid we're going to say something really.
We're live. We're just as liable. I'm just as liable to do that live as unlive.
Me too, I was going to say.
So I think Delegate Smith is here, but
Okay.
just off. So you can start, Mr. Chair, if you.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, great. So I think we have 3 or 4 bills. Michelle, you want to walk us through them?
Yep.
I know we have Delegate Solomon's bill we passed last year, but I think there may be
Yes, so the first bill is House Bill 19, which is Delegate Solomon's bill, the Safe Walk to Schools Act. It passed last year. There were a couple of people in committee who voted no against this bill. Delegate Solomon has an amendment, although he's not here, so someone needs to move it. It addresses some of the concerns about the IAC being particular about what needs to be in the plan. So it makes clear that the plans are completely local choices about how kids go to and from school, but that the LEAs need to submit the plans as part of the process. So it just retains that local control that a lot of people said was an issue with the bill.
I think it makes it a lot better. I'll move the amendment. Is there a second on the amendment?
Second.
All right. All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, just raise your hand. Okay. On the bill as amended, is there any discussion? Okay. I will move favorable on the bill.
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, just raise your hand. All right. Delegate Novotny is recorded in the negative, but that bill passes and it moves on to full committee, Madam Chair.
Good.
What's our next bill?
House Bill 20 is Delegate Chang's bill. It adds 2 members to the Stadium Authority.
Great bill. Any discussion on this bill? Okay. I will move favorable.
Second.
Second.
All right. It's moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, raise your hand. That one is unanimous. And do we have one or two more?
We have three more. So House
Three
Bill
more.
24 is Delegate Lukey's bill, the Cybersecurity Scholarship Program. It makes some changes to the current cybersecurity scholarship program to make it more accessible and better aligned with the cybersecurity industry. The delegate proposed adding a new loan assistance repayment program, but the amendment in front of you strips that provision from the bill and just retains the scholarship portion changes.
Okay, so we're going to take the LARP portion out of the bill. I will move that amendment.
Second.
Second.
All right, all in favor of that amendment, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, raise your hand. Any discussion on the bill as amended? I'll move favorable.
Second.
Okay, on the bill as amended, all in favor, say aye.
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 And any opposed, raise your hand. Also unanimous, the bill passes.
House Bill 87 is Delegate Hill's bill. We did this last year. It was unanimous. It just clarifies that Peace Corps volunteer retains their in-state eligibility.
Right.
I think it was unanimous out of committee and on the floor, so we'll move favorable.
Second.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, raise your hand. All right, good work. Another unanimous bill passes.
The last bill, House Bill 111, is Delegate Lopez's bill. We did this also last year. There were just 3 votes on the floor against it. It prohibits a private education lender from initiating a private education loan collection unless the lender possesses certain documents. There's one amendment, it is a technical amendment to clarify that this piece that's in the bill is preempted by federal law, so we took it out. So it's truly technical.
Okay, move the technical amendment.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, raise your hand. On the bill as amended, any discussion? Hearing none, I will move favorable.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, raise your hand. Good work, subcommittee. We couldn't take up too much of our chair's time, so thanks for joining us, Madam Chair. We moved
Thank
efficiently,
you.
I think. So
Good to see you all.
good work.
Great to
We'll see you
see you.
soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.